Troubadours, those story-telling minstrels of the High Middle Ages known for entertaining royal courts and enchanting ladies and lords throughout medieval France. It has come to light that they trace their origins to a far earlier, nearly forgotten history through their language. Though once thought lost to time, it has been recovered, and I am going to tell you its story. But first, Abo naam vau laut de avoive agmata swan evvikve. I'm Shadriarch, and this is my entry for the third cursed Conlang Circus, Droukḥa, a cursed proto-language of ancient Sumerian and Old Akhitan, which the so-called first troubadours constructed to be most pleasing and impressive when heard so that they could tell the grandest of stories. I'll start with my rather basic method for reconstructing words into Droukḥa, using the word for world as an example. Fortunately, Old Akhitan already traces back to Indo-European, moving from its word lemon to Gallics B2, Latin's mundus, Proto-Italics terza, to Indo-Europeans degom, which I surely pronounced without error. Yet more fortunately, Sumerian is a direct descendant of Droukḥa, so we reference its word ki. These are simply mashed together with much linguistic expertise to make the Droukḥa word for world, mokid. On to phonetics, which actually exists this time. The consonants were reconstructed as the following: ma, na, nga, pa, ba, pa, ta, da, ka, ga, cha, ga, fa, va, sa, za, sha, cha, ha, za, za, cha, za, za, ra, la, and y. The vowels were as follows: e, a, a, u, o. Vowel harmony in Droukḥa comes through ATR distinction. If a vowel isn't neutral, it must be followed by its opposite ATR to accomplish neutralization. Positive ATR directly followed by negative ATR and vice versa. The only neutral vowel is E, but since N and Y are sometimes treated as vowels, they are considered neutral also. Positive ATR vowels include E, A, U, and O, and negative ATR vowels are the rest. For an example, the tetrapthong yao, which I've butchered, begins with the neutral I, leads to the negative ATR A, is therefore followed with the positive ATR E, and before concluding with the negative ATR O. Whatever word this tetrapthong was in would require at least an additional positive ATR vowel for neutral harmony, which is where neutralizing harmonizers come in. If a conjugated word lacks harmony, the offending vowel or vowels have a neutralizing harmonizer added to it, or its syllable, as a suffix, until harmony is achieved. The neutralizing harmonizers for a word with positive ATR are A and O, and those for a word with negative ATR are E and U. With harmony introduced, we can get into syllables. Of course, Droukḥa syllable construction is most elegant in nature, having few restraints on the onset nucleus and coda, with the exception that if there is a second consonant included in the coda, it must be aspirated, fricative, or affricate. Syllable stress is also very important to Droukḥa speech, as a poetic language. There are 5 rather than 3 forms of syllable stress in Droukḥa: unstressed, tertiary stress, secondary stress, stressed, and overstressed. Primary stress always falls on the last syllable before conjugation, and overstressed syllables commonly appear in the first syllable of a proper noun. The others have no exact rules. For example, the word yeo bai ach sui vutshaimoan, meaning hearken, has a stress pattern including each of the 5 syllable stresses in this order: secondary stress, unstressed, overstressed, unstressed, tertiary stress, stressed, unstressed, unstressed. The stressed syllable, though it must be the last syllable of a root word, is not often the last syllable of a word, since any prefix or suffix is considered unstressed. You may wonder why all the words so far have been so lengthy. This is because all Droukḥa words are required to be 8 syllables in order to meet line length requirements, which I'll explain later. For now, we're not yet done with syllables. Droukḥa, due to the importance of how syllables must be articulated and in order to meet the 8-syllable line length requirements, has a system for syllable conjugation. This not at all cumbersome process demands that the stressed syllables be conjugated to avoid confusion in pronunciation. This helpful chart will explain the process. Monosyllables are simple. One locates a syllable's stress on the leftmost column, and the column directly beside it has the correct suffix. Sometimes monosyllables are used when a di, tri, or tetrasyllable would do, just to increase syllable count. For disyllables, one determines the syllables which compose the disyllable on the top row, for example, a secondary stress and tertiary stress. Next, move to the first column and locate the type of syllable which the dissyllable begins with, per our example, a secondary stress. This gives the suffix e. It is then attached to the final syllable of the dissyllable. This rule applies to all multisyllable constructions. Trisyllables are determined similarly. Find its first two syllables on the top row, then the third syllable in the first column. For example, if our trisyllable is composed of a tertiary stressed, overstressed, and stressed syllable, we find the tertiary and overstressed syllable combination on the top row, then the stressed monosyllable in the first column. This gives our trisyllable the suffix ana. For tetrasyllables, follow the dissyllable process twice, combining the first and second syllables as suffix with the third and fourth. If our tetrasyllable begins with a stressed and secondary stressed syllable, we locate on the top row. We find the stressed syllable in the first column. This is the first part of our tetrasyllable ak. If the third and fourth syllables are overstressed and stressed, we locate this combination on the top row, find overstressed in the first column, and see that the second part of our trisyllable is u, making aku this tetrasyllable suffix. With phonetics done, nouns are next. The first part of conjugating a noun is case, covering several aspects of a noun's role in a sentence. Droukḥa features a wide variety of cases, including intransitive, ergative, accusative, allative, genitive, equative, dative, directive, terminative, comitative, locative, ablative, and distributive. Case also accounts for animacy, gender, and number, animate and inanimate, masculine, feminine, and neuter, and singular and plural, though plural only occurs in animate words. Articles carry the same information as case, while accounting for definite, indefinite, and proper nouns. Rhyme is another important part of all words which must be included. This will be explained further, but know that a particular line rhyme ending is added as a suffix to every word. Now for adjectives. There are very few true adjectives in Droukḥa, with most being modified verbs added to nouns as suffixes. Oftentimes adjectives are added to a noun just to increase its syllable count, which is never confusing. Fortunately, adjectives are easy to form. Just add the suffix a to a verb. For example, lem, meaning to be gross or horrible, transforms into lemma, meaning gross or horrible. One may also add the prefix nieg to a verb, which means that an adjective is more whatever it is. This also applies to the prefix nam, meaning most gross or horrible when attached to lemma. This is a chart of the various pronouns and enclitics in Droukḥa. Enclitics may be added as a suffix to a noun to demonstrate possession or association with a given person or thing. Due to the number of affixes to nouns and verbs, chains for each have been created to show when to put which affix where. The noun chain is as follows. First the noun and its syllables, then the article, any negations, numerals, adjectives, and enclitics in that order, then case, and finally line rhyme ending, always last in any word. Now let's try conjugating a noun in full. We'll use the word for curse again, staying on theme. Assuming our noun is an intransitive, inanimate, neuter, singular word of an indefinite nature without an enclitic, the article will be dos, the case suffix he, and the line rhyme ending ve. This makes yao dos hive. Knowing that this will not be enough for 8 syllables, we'll add lem, giving us yao dos lem hive, or horrible curse. But we're not done yet. We need to conjugate our syllables. This word's current syllable structure is secondary stressed, tertiary stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. To meet syllable count, we need all 3 stresses to be conjugated, giving us f for secondary stressed, vu for tertiary stress, and o for stressed. Putting those in the right places, we have yao fodos vulem hi ove. We have a complete syllable structure, but we're still not done. We need vowel harmony. Currently, this is neutral, negative, positive, negative, negative, positive, 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 neutral, negative, positive. Most of that cancels, but leaves negative positive u, and positive e. We'll add e to and as to u and e, making the final product yao feo dos voalem hi ove. With nouns out of the way, onward to verbs. Verb conjugation outlines much of a verb's role in a sentence, accounting for boundedness, mood, voice, pronominals, dimensionals, aspect, and tense, but is otherwise pretty straightforward. The complete charts of various types of endings for nouns and verbs are in the full document listed in the description. The verb chain is as follows: boundedness, mood, voice, pronominal, dimensional, aspect, tense, the verb and its syllables, then line rhyme ending. Let's try conjugating a verb. We'll say our verb lem, meaning gross or horrible, and the adjective we used earlier, is a finite, intransitive, indicative, active, simple action in the present, without need for a pronominal and dimensional, the affixes for which are now below. This gives us ihe doiti leman, and a syllable structure of secondary stress, unstressed, unstressed, tertiary stress, stress, unstressed. Now, there would be too many syllable markers in this case, so we need our first two stressed syllables, the secondary stress and tertiary stress, to be conjugated as a disyllable, giving us the suffix e. The stressed syllable is conjugated as normal with the suffix o, though each of these additions requires a glottal stop for the syllable and rhyme distinction, with the result being ihe doiti elemoan. We are, of course, not done. We need to account for vowel harmony. As it is, this word is neutral, negative, positive, negative, neutral, negative, positive, negative, negative. Many of these cancel, leaving a negative a, o, and a. We'll add an e to all of these. However, the last of these neutralizing harmonizers would change the rhyme of our word. In such cases, the offending neutralizing harmonizer is shifted to the beginning of the word, making the final product e hetwai ti elem oan, or horribles. Being a poetic and storytelling language, syntax is an essential aspect of Droukḥa speech. One cannot merely string words together and expect praise after all. Droukḥa is expressed in SOV word order and 6 sentence forms which have been recovered. There may be more for other situations, but these are as yet unaccounted for. Most of the names for these sentence forms come from associated Old Occitan poetic forms, similar to those with which the troubadours told their stories in the courts. The sentence forms are canso, danza, love request, jeu parti, conversatio, and annuncio. Each has a particular function being employed whenever the associated nature of speech shifts. Canso sentences consist of 5 or more stanzas of any number of 8-syllable lines. The first stanza's rhyme structure must be repeated throughout, hence the need for line-rhyme endings in Droukḥa. Otherwise, sentences could not be properly spoken. Canso sentences are used when speaking to someone the speaker has great respect for, generally members of the court of which the Droukḥa was a part. Danza sentences involve 4 or more stanzas of any number of 8-syllable lines and features a ballad-style rhyme structure. They were generally used for telling stories. The love request has a structure akin to a pastorella poem, though consisting of 7 or more stanzas with 14-syllable lines, breaking Droukḥa rules, yes, with a mono-rhyme throughout. This sentence structure was used when gaining the favor of the court so that the troubadour may integrate into it through their linguistic skills. Jeu parti sentences are made up of 3 stanzas of any number of 8-syllable lines spoken by 2 different troubadours, in turns, using an ABC rhyme scheme. This sentence structure was only used when one troubadour attempted to usurp the court of another for themselves. Each then had to justify their usefulness to the court and to one another, using this form in order to defend their place or take a place in it. This was effectively the way troubadours determined which court was a troubadour's territory, as it were. The conversatio structure, on the other hand, was used for casual conversation between troubadours, consisting of a single stanza with any number of 8-syllable lines spoken in turns with a loose rhyme scheme. Though, due to its simpler nature, this sentence structure would never be used in the presence of the court. Finally, we have the annuncio form. This one used 1 or more stanzas of 1 or more 8-syllable lines using an ABBA rhyme scheme. This was employed when a troubadour was instructed to make an announcement on the behalf of a respected individual, namely the royal court which they served. This is the form which the later translation will take. Lastly, I must mention Droukḥa's natural narrative speech. A speaker of Droukḥa will naturally communicate as though they are telling a story, placing themselves in a third-person limited perspective. Any dialogue they recount or begin will typically feature a phrase that indicates speech is about to begin, even though they are currently speaking. For example, a nondescript troubadour might begin speaking by saying, "Then the troubadour said," continue. This practice came about because of the Droukḥa troubadours' desire to constantly entertain the court, and setting their speech in the form of a narrative seemed to appeal to the sensibilities of the court, so it stuck. All this being said, I now move to what is perhaps the most compelling aspect of Droukḥa, and perhaps the most cursed, that being the nature of the ever-perpetuating Droukḥa poem. This is where the storytelling aspect comes into full swing as well. You see, when Droukḥa is spoken, the speaker must continue on from the last part of the story which had ever been uttered before. Because of this aspect, Droukḥa's speech may be understood as one continuous poem, telling the extended story of all Droukḥa speakers past and present. This will be explained further after the most recent Droukḥa utterance is provided, so that the translation of the required text may actually begin. The following is a translation of what is presumed to be the most recent utterance of Droukḥa speech. My love, I cannot sing for you any longer, for now I must go to face the east winds, as storied Droukḥa did long ago to compose poetry. One day I will return to the court, but my story will be told by a different Droukḥa. Listen for me, I am in their words. Here is a rewording for easier translation, and now the original text in Droukḥa, with 5 stanzas and an envoy. There are 3 aspects to the continuation of the Droukḥa poem: a previous poem summation, in which the most recent utterance is summarized into a single sentence of speech, a logical transition, in which a reasonable explanation for the story's continuation is fabricated into one sentence, providing justification for any shift in tone setting or what have you. Then the subsequent narrative is added, whose length is not limited as these other 2 steps are. Continuing the Droukḥa poem and the narrative story it contains was no small feat, as all Droukḥa had to coordinate their speech and be certain that none would speak out of order, and thus lose the story they were telling. This is one of the many reasons Droukḥa does not exist today, but was thoroughly impressive to have heard spoken, since one knew how much effort went into such coordination. Luckily for me, there are no living speakers with which I must coordinate, and I need only work with this final utterance. With that, let's move on to the rewording of the translation, so it can actually be added into the Droukḥa story proper. We begin with the text provided for translation. Next, a summation of the previous Droukḥa utterance is created. He has returned to his love through the perpetual Droukḥa story vowed. After this, a logical transition is fabricated. But when another Droukḥa came to her, she no longer recognized the now strange tale. Then we have our SOV word order, narratively structured text. To combine everything together, we'll go line by line. The first line will incorporate but and he from the first 2 parts, resulting in, but this Droukḥa to her said, he shall hearken. Line 2 will actually split into 2 separate lines. Then it will take when and return from the prior parts, creating by Agmashuya it was ruled, when his son Gusaba returned. Line 4 will take another Droukḥa and say another person, Tian, against the lesser side of the invisible origin of light practices. Line 5 will take came and through to make they came as a result of cosmetic prohibitions of silence and restraint being beset. Line 6 will use perpetual, recognized, and story to create for Ngu, perpetual slave to creativity, inspection and certification prior to recognition of storied Navya Gunza's official status shall make. Finally, line 7 will take vowed, now strange, and tale to have vow your now strange humanity to deny. No politics in real life's tale there are. So the text will actually be translating as this, which I feel still conveys the original meaning fairly well, all things considered, but it has been successfully incorporated into the ongoing Droukḥa narrative poem. Oh, and that was step 1 of the translation process. I won't be going over every other step to save you the hassle, just presenting the translation, but all the necessary components have been provided. Anyways, on to that actual translation. Vastrúfakanye e oyan, echnelfia of maru o ar. Yoadu biai dadim dwelksivir, zainai fo nautsa u oi ar, by achswi vuts heim o an, egnyau sa voal zu dir oi an, lorodum de of ben oi at, eoadu bin daat dim lipsivan, genan fo fulen nakoi an, gusaglen tal geakoi an, Galil agea of se o an, eoadu dai dim madsivan, oludsi en avil oi an, tain nine foi sin ev o e an, yoan vus os for gyur at ove, naud for zuis vuf, vil oi an, ase zu meru maisivan, e lens for ne gyue voare ots, a ze lights fos was gir eove, a si fuege o de ove, a ser foe ca o a de ove, ai hue du bas swam mid zwanve, ai hua dua bieda dim siven vents, der ngwa ne sab gel les dove, que lau gul a of a ir elve, vash gulus pera vilanve, a naiv guns njai do raidolve, e sars von of sait aitove, a lan wod lut dim weleove, I hwai biat ti jawed gank ove, ai hwai biat jawed dus ove, ut sai nyang yen nam fud ewa e ots, o luda per sine of vil ots. I he bua tim wai hwaim si ve, ui he ed biati ke audan, e bols nuako fulun vaul ki oi an. Ti vabdes kaufpaim mai ogve, siak fio hid I boavu vil ots. I hwa du bea at ti its suots. Link to the full document can be found in the description, and thanks for watching.